It's story time. Story time. Let's read it story time. Story time. I'm geeked to story time. Story time. You and me is story time. Story time. Let's achieve. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Story Time with me, Kayla. How's everyone doing out there? I hope you are doing well and making sure to stay safe. Now we are continuing our Hispanic Heritage Month fun by reading another book that I've got from the library. So without further ado, the book we'll be reading tonight is called Dancing Hands. How Teresa Carreño Played the Piano for President Lincoln. Ready to see what this book is all about? Ready, set, let's begin. Dancing Hands. How Teresa Carreño Played the Piano for President Lincoln. Written by Margarita Engle and Rafael Lopez. Here we go. Dancing Hands. When Teresa was a little girl in Venezuela, Mama sang lullabies while Papa showed Teresita how to let her happy hands dance across all the beautiful dark and light keys of a piano. At first, making music seemed magical, but Teresa soon learned that playing a piano could be hard work. Sometimes she had to struggle to make the stubborn music behave as she practiced gentle songs that sounded like colorful birds singing in the dark and light branches of a shade-dappled mango tree, and powerful songs that roared like prowling jaguars beside towering waterfalls in the mysterious green jungle. If Teresa felt sad, music cheered her. And when she was happy, the piano helped her share bursts of joy. By the time she was 6, she could write her own songs, and at 7, she performed in the peaceful chapel of a magnificent cathedral, playing hymns that shimmered like hummingbirds. Wow. I wasn't doing that at 6 and 7, I can tell you that. Music was Teresita's delight. But suddenly, when she was 8, a war changed everything. Guns blazed, swords flashed, and poor Papa had to rush the whole family down to the seashore and onto a ship into a storm where wind howled, waves rolled, barrels tumbled, ropes snapped, and clouds bucked and kicked across the wind sky like angry mules. And if you haven't noticed, she has 2 names. I think that's her nickname. By the time the ship arrived in New York, Teresa felt lost. She was homesick. How could she ever play happy songs again in this unfamiliar country where she did not know a single friend? Few people spoke Spanish, and all around her, curious strangers stared and whispered, as if her whole family belonged in a museum of oddities. Yeah, it's not polite to point and stare. Worst of all, there was fighting here too. The horrible Civil War. North battling South as soldiers marched and newspaper boys hollered about victories, defeats, funerals, and fears. Without a new piano, Teresa would have felt even more lonely. But soon she discovered that wherever one is, some people are friendly, drawn together by song. Musicians came to her home, playing along while they listened to the dazzling notes of her dancing hands. Determined to improve, Teresa practiced graceful waltz and sonatas, booming symphonies, and lively folk songs, her strong hands accepting the challenge of life's many dark and light moods. People began to call her the piano girl. Her picture was in the newspaper and on posters advertising concerts where she performed with great orchestras that invited her to play solos. Teresa triumphed in enormous theaters where children clapped and cheered while their parents stood up and tossed roses. With Papa at her side, she traveled to elegant cities, and by the time she was 10, the piano girl grew so famous that she received amazing invitations, including one so special that she could hardly believe her eyes. President Abraham Lincoln wanted her to play for his whole family at the White House. That is amazing. But the country was still at war. So Teresa arrived in Washington, D.C. at a time when freed slaves were signing up to be soldiers. The injured moan and nurses groan from the sheer weariness of caring for so many fevers and wounds. Not long ago, the president's young son had fallen sick and had died. Men argued about battles lost, battles won, speeches made, victory delayed. Teresa began to worry. How could music soothe so much trouble? Poor Abraham Lincoln! Teresa hoped she could entertain the president, his grieving wife, and their 2 surviving sons. Her fingers might stumble, the rhythms emerging too slow or too fast. But Teresa was brave, and she believed in trying her best. So she entered the White House silently, clutching Papa's hand fiercely as they stepped into a room so red that it looked like a storm or a sunrise. Teresa remembered how it felt to be a homeless refugee and how lonely she had been surrounded by strangers, some of them rude and others kind. The memory of meeting past challenges now helped her fingers dance, celebrating the way life had turned out to be, a mixture of all sorts of feelings, happy and sad. But the piano was poorly tuned, making her music sound ugly. What should she do? Refuse to play? She stopped, feeling discouraged, until Mr. Lincoln smiled kindly and asked for his favorite song, Listen to the Mockingbird. Teresa knew she could play this lively piece, even on an imperfect piano, so her fingers leaped across all the glorious dark and light keys, improvising the way mockingbirds do, the melody changing as she went along. Music swirled, twirled, and soared on wings of sound. The president listened quietly to the notes that rose, swayed, rippled, and dimpled like a bird in the blue sky above a green forest. He closed his eyes, nodded his head, stretched his long fingers, and tapped the tips of his shiny shoes. When the joyful song ended, Abe Lincoln stood up and clapped, smiling at the piano girl, who smiled too, because she knew that her music had brought comfort to a grieving family, at least for one brief, wonderful evening of dancing hands. From then on, Teresa felt certain she would always be bold enough to share her musical courage anywhere in the world, simply by letting her fingers travel across all the beautiful dark and light moments of hope. The end. Okay, crew. That was such a nice story, wasn't it? To be able to play for the president, that is amazing. You see why you should always do what you love? No matter the bad that might be around you, there is always a positive light somewhere. If it brings you happiness, do it. I thank you all so much for joining me, but it's time to say goodbye. Are you ready? Goodbye, 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 goodbye. My friends, goodbye to you. I hope to see you again real soon. Be proud of all your work tonight. Now climb into bed and sleep real tight. On the count of 3, let's say goodnight. 1, 2, 3. Good night.